We were stuck on an airport, doom scrolling through Instagram until this thing popped up. What's up everyone, awesome to see you here. Welcome to the very first episode of 3D+AI Sandbox. This is a series when we break down two crazy worlds for you, the one from Panikhida and the one with too many cacti. Yeah, we break down the 3D stuff, jump into post-production, and eventually go into editing and animation. But anyway, today the goal is simple: how to start world building. How do you even come up with this nonsense? So yeah, today we're putting things into perspective. We are giving you some brain shortcuts and a few design tricks behind our worlds. Yeah, sweet, let's jump right into it. So first off, if you have never designed or built a world of your own, it can feel impossible. It feels like there's too many decisions, too much choices, too much chaos. Where do you even start, right? And I totally get it. Trying to come up with everything at once, that's a recipe to a disaster. Instead, you should start small. You want to narrow your focus. And one pretty cool way to do that, especially for beginners, is this. Start by focusing on one of three different areas: character, architecture, or environment. Just one. Pick the area that kind of draws you the most, something that you are excited about. Maybe this is the architecture of like a medieval castle. Maybe that's like a desert environment. Maybe it's like a samurai characters in the field. There are endless ways to begin. Just choose something that fascinates you and narrow your focus to one of three areas. Don't worry about everything else yet. Then explore, get to know it better, refine it, and add that one unique touch that makes it yours. And once you do, the rest will start to fall in place. Almost magically, you know? The world will begin to build itself around it. Let me show you. In the case of Panikhida, we started with the character bucket. Actually, we were inspired by a video, like no joke, but this was actually the beginning of Panikhida, even though we didn't know it at the time. We were stuck on an airport, doom scrolling through Instagram until this thing popped up. It was an account called Masked Traditions, and it was like an absolute gold. Yeah, no comment. Yeah, this one was an actual spark. It was a traditional Bulgarian folk dancers called kukeri. And let me pause here. Let's just appreciate how beautiful this is. So yeah, we both saw it, and after a couple of weeks, we kind of reminded ourselves about it. We thought that, yeah, this is cool. Let's see where it goes. Fast forward, we typed kukeri dancer into Midjourney, and oh boy, that was an interesting adventure. Starting with some pretty nice and chill generations, but after about a minute, we were getting this. Yeah, not gonna lie, things escalate quickly in Midjourney. We went through a couple of different iterations. You can see the prompts on the screen. We also mashed images together. This is where a little bit of an experience helps, like knowing how to curate and avoid picking something over the top, you know, but with time, your instincts get sharper. Eventually, we found something that felt fresh. Not like revolutionary, but enough to get us excited. It was enough to build a whole world around it. Alright, now circling back to the three buckets, character, architecture, and environment. When you have that starting point, that's the moment when you can think about the other buckets. And the best part, you don't need to be wildly original about them. I mean, you can go crazy, but if you just make sure that the architecture and an environment fits the tone, you're already in great shape. For example, in our case, since everything was rooted in Slavic traditions and customs, we just went for a typical European forest. That's where those customs take place. So we just select the logical place for it. And obviously, you don't need to invent the European forest from scratch. You can ask Google or even ChatGPT. You can ask to share the names of the plants and then build it from there, like piece by piece. And by the way, if you'd like to get some additional help with creating environments, I've got good news. About 4 years ago, we made an article about it. There are 5 different biomes with links to models and additional comments on that. Feel free to look it up, links in the description. Circling back, the last missing bucket is the architecture. And you don't need to be crazy original about it as well. Since we revolve around the Slavic mythology, we can Google something like Slavic architecture and take it from there. We prompted something like Slavic chapel or Orthodox chapel in Midjourney, and honestly, there were a lot of cool options. You can just use and model any of those and everything will work. But since we are so-called designers, we took it a little bit further and we designed our own chapel. It's based on those initial inspirations, but it's a bit more custom. We wanted to have some Slavic reliefs, we wanted it to be see-through, and to include some taller elements that match the shape of the forest. Actually, we will walk you through the creation of this chapel. We will go through the whole scene in 2 videos from now. So yeah, lots of cool stuff coming up. So just to recap, in the case of Panikhida, the design process was pretty straightforward. We started with the character bucket. We were inspired by those Bulgarian cookery dancers. We explored that direction until we found something that felt unique. From there, we moved on into the environment, thinking about where those rituals naturally take place. And finally, we moved on to architecture. We decided to design one of our own. You can see how the ideas snowballed from one to the next. And of course, you need to do your homework and know a thing or two about the world, but this approach makes it so much easier on yourself. This is a great way to ease yourself into the world building. It's extremely fun, gives you enough room to be creative and not to get overwhelmed by the infinite choices. And if you're interested in advanced world building, like color theory, advanced research, check out our 3D+AI Masterclass. The last chapter covers a Silk Road image, and it goes real deep in both artistic and technical side of things. We go through finding a golden reference, spatial ideas, color palette research, and yeah, not to mention the full 3D modeling and post-production time-lapse. I totally recommend it to anyone that wants to level up their design, artistic, and technical skills. All the links in the description. Now, let's talk about the Cacti project. Cacti project. It's just so ridiculous. But anyway, for this one, we started with the character bucket as well. But the inspiration was something a little bit different, especially if you're new to world building. Instead of having an image, video, or whatever, you can also start with something completely random. In this case, it all started with just 3 words: cactus, gold, and priest. Like literally only this. There's a technique when you roll the dice and each dice has words imprinted on it. So you roll and that's the beginning of world building, like a totally random beginning that somehow leads to a cool place. Hear me out. We had those 3 words and we thought, why not see and what happens when we combine them together? No pressure, no expectations, just play around and see what sticks. And if you want to test some ideas, you can go to leonardo.ai. In case you don't know, it's similar to Midjourney, but it gives a stream of infinite generations. They just keep coming, like non-stop. You can also filter through it, explore different styles. Definitely something worth trying out if you want to get that first feeling if the idea has potential, as crazy as it may seem. Then we went back to Midjourney to get proper generations, more refined. This is a phase when we just keep prompting and deciding where to go with it. What's the general vibe of our world? Is it a Mad Max? Is it a Burning Man? Or maybe this is a piñata guy. Blah, blah. Yeah, not gonna lie, it's easy to get carried away, but eventually we landed on those characters and it was the time to move on to architecture and environment. And this is where you might hit a little bit of a challenge. Because if your characters are heavily stylized, just like ours, it can be hard to find or prompt an architecture that feels like it belongs in the same world. The direction we are going isn't anything mainstream or easy to define, but no worries, here's a little bit of a trick to make it work. You can upload an image to Midjourney, choose it as a reference, make sure to drag it into the style reference slot, then type in prompt. It's best to reuse some of the keywords from our original generation. In our case, that was something like an ornate cactus and Mesoamerica. Click, wait a moment, and boom, it's here. And the best part is they have the same visual DNA as your character. You can run tons of variations, explore different directions, and everything still feels like it belongs in the same world. In our case though, we didn't even end up using architecture, and we decided our characters are just enough to make it interesting. So yeah, we totally skipped that bucket, which is totally fine as well. Now moving on to the environment, we leaned into Mesoamerica, and this direction came into our minds because one of our initial world building words was cactus. As simple as that. This is a deserted environment full of cacti, so that just made sense. And fun fact, during our cacti research, as stupid as it may seem, we found one that is pretty special. It's a big San Pedro cactus, and this is not some Midjourney stuff, those actually exist in real life. We thought that this is cool and we totally need to place it somewhere, and yeah, at this stage the research process was done. We got our characters, we skipped the architecture, and we planned to recreate the Mesoamerican environment. That's the game plan. But I want to give you a sneak peek into what happens after you get those world building puzzles in place. The next step is turning those assets into a sketch. This is one of the first sketches we did for this project. You can see some 3D models of priests already in place, but everything else is pretty rough, because we don't want to commit to final details, right? At this stage, we are just trying to block out the composition and see if the story holds up. And while it was a cool direction, we felt we could push it a little bit further. So we regrouped and went with this one. As you can see, there's two new characters, the master and the slave. But aside from that, the universe we built stayed the same. Like same priests, no architecture, and lots of those San Pedro cacti. So yeah, the core idea is still there, but the way it's crystallized is different. This world can go and should go in various ways, but that's just a sneak peek to what's to come. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, we'll dive into 3D lighting, composition, post-production, and more in future lessons. Today is all about giving you a solid head start. Alright, we are slowly bringing this lesson home, but before we wrap up, I want to show you one last thing. This is to explore different styles in Midjourney. So yeah, it's kind of fun. It's borderline addictive, and it gives you a decent level of control. So yeah, you'll be able to visualize a space pirate road, or combine Vikings with a rainforest. And honestly, anything you can imagine. We'll actually show you the full process of generating this concept. This is a fusion of feudal Japan and Blade Runner style, and yeah, it's super duper cool. And even 2 years ago, doing a combo like this would have been incredibly hard, but today we can do it in minutes. And no, we are not talking about writing a single prompt and call it done. The process is a little bit more elaborate, and perhaps you can even pause a video and ask yourself, how would you approach it? Can you even imagine having control while making it? Either way, let's enjoy the ride and see how it all comes together. So we started with the character bucket. We generated a traditional Japanese worker in the field. The prompt is very simple, and in return, we get a very classic result, like a pointed hat and ruler vibe. Then we reran the same prompt again, but with a different aspect ratio. It's actually better to use square if you want to get more of the character and less of the background. We ended up choosing the third one. Everything was fairly visible, accessories, outfit, and we could see the full figure. Next step, the robot character. We followed the same approach, but just changing the prompt. Something more like a Blade Runner, a cyberpunk kind of world. You can see the first batch of generations, and while they looked cool, we tweaked the prompt by adding Japanese to it. That gave us a bit narrower generations, which was exactly what we wanted. And we immediately liked the first one. Still pretty mechy, but with some Japanese accents. And yeah, you might already guess where this is going, but if not, bear with us. Next, we combined those two characters, using them as style references. On top of that, we added a prompt. It is quite generic, and that's perfect for us. We are more interested in the style collision than the prompts itself. So yeah, we got a batch of generations that started to feel interesting. We repeated this process with a few different images, as you can see here. Again, lots of cool stuff, but actually we keep digging a little bit deeper. We mashed together multiple images, the field worker and a couple of robots. There's like no limits to mixing anything you like. In fact, I would encourage that. This is a true fuel for discovery. And finally, we landed on the second one. It had this quirky vibe of a helper who went grocery shopping. So yeah, based on it, we made some strong variations. We are hoping to find something similar, but even better. Usually when we are almost there, we like to shake things up and see some alternatives. It always allows us to fine-tune some micro details. And eventually we click pan to add the legs and make the character complete. With the character locked in, we moved on to the architecture and environment, and we made it extremely easy on ourselves. We used our finalized character, used it as a style reference again, and this time leaned more toward the prompt. Same trick as we used in the Cacti project, we want to extract the style and let the additional prompt keywords do the job. And the results, yeah, really cool. Some additional characters are visible, but we don't pay attention to them. What mattered was the environment, the buildings, the rice field, and the general vibe. And here's the last trick for today. We use this environment as a style, but this time used our character as an omni reference, meaning it will be present in the scene to some extent, depending on the slider. And boom, there you have it. This is a concept created by combining two seemingly unrelated genres. You know, so cool. And of course, you're not locked into a single direction. You can always combine things differently and see how it pans out. From this character alone, we can build multiple environments. You can have endless variations actually, but the key is always the same. Start with the character and let this whole world evolve around it. Alright, that's it for the first video in the series. As I said, this series will get more intense as we go. In the next one, we dive into 3D+AI asset creation. It's gonna be a fun one. See you there.